Shrewd Manager Christianity's Position. The Shroud is at least 1,500 years old. This is our third look at recent tests to date the Shroud of Turin. Flax cellulose in linen degrades over time. The wide-angle X-ray scattering, or WAXS method, measures the degradation and converts it to age. Natural aging over thousands of years is replicated in mere hours in an oven. WAXS works by firing X-rays at test fibers, forming a diffraction pattern. Intensity maps of the sample's patterns indicate the age. Sharper peaks means younger, with less deterioration and more crystalline material. Crystallographer Dr. Liberato De Caro and his colleagues report their findings in these papers. The method uses some samples we saw in videos 4.5a and b. For the Shroud, De Caro uses a sample about 0.5 millimeters by 1 millimeter. Results were tested against 4 small samples, circa 3500 BC, 73 and 600 AD, and modern. Assuming average conditions of 20 to 22.5 degrees Celsius and 55 to 75% relative humidity for 7 centuries in Europe and 13 centuries in unknown locales, De Caro finds first that experimental results fit a 2,000-year-old cloth. The diffraction peaks are very close to the Masada sample from 73 AD. Second, a medieval date is very unlikely. To be medieval, the Shroud would need storage temperatures close to the hottest registered on Earth. Third, exposure to the 1532 fire likely didn't alter the aging effect. De Caro heated linen to 200 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. The intensity peaks before the experiment and after are virtually identical. Why would this be? Intense fires reduce relative humidity, which may have offset the heat's effect on aging. Secondary evidence agrees that the heat didn't age the cloth. Oven heat turns linen yellow. The authors demonstrate the image would disappear if exposed to 200 degrees Celsius for even a few minutes. A fire hot enough to age the cloth would have destroyed the image. Fourth, Monte Carlo simulations built with De Caro's experimental data agree very well with proposed paths the Shroud would take from Jerusalem to Turin. How reliable are these studies? The researchers' paper of their methodologies, including WAXS, was accepted for publication on +1 after positive refereeing of 3 referees for 3 months. That is, it passed rigorous peer review. However, shortly after, +1's editors retracted the paper, citing concerns that the data are insufficient to support the conclusions and questioning the provenance and integrity of the material. De Caro vigorously protested the retraction point by point. The editors never responded. So which is right? The editor's original decision to publish or the editor's later decision to retract? Our view is the editors are obliged to respond to the author's protest. Until then, we side with the referees that the paper is valid. Critics bring other challenges to the WAXS papers. Samples are too few and too small. The authors are too biased. Other writings by the authors are questionable. De Caro's assumptions are not justified. And the tested subject material is not officially traceable to the Shroud. Officially is the key. No one doubts the fragment's authenticity. Assessed on merits, WAXS is an intriguing dating technique. It's non-destructive, so the same materials can be repeatedly tested by multiple labs. Plus, the samples are so small, all experiments are blinded. We'll let De Caro have the last word. His team calls for a more systematic X-ray investigation of more samples of the Shroud's linen. They also call for more experiments using ovens to accelerate the natural aging of cellulose. In sum, all the dating methods we've seen are inconclusive. Even the 1988 radiocarbon test that dates the fabric to the 14th century. All need more samples to calibrate and more subject material to test. Many of the charges against an ancient date apply equally well against a medieval date, including limited samples, biased investigators, questionable assumptions, and novel methods. However, none of this hurts our case for authenticity. Think of the Shroud and New Testament as data sets. They both portray the same subject, Jesus' passion and death. See the intersection. But each contains many details not found in the other, so neither is the source and neither is the copy. Since they are so closely related and neither copied the other, the simple inference is they are based on a shared data set that contains all the details and perhaps more. Since much of the data outside the intersection is medically and historically accurate, the simplest inference is the shared data set is historical Jesus. The 1500-year-old archetype is also a set of Jesus data. Its similarities to the Shroud are obvious. How are they related? The principle of parsimony tells us simpler is better. Either there is a single common source, or one copied the other. The simplest common source is Jesus of Nazareth. The simplest duplication scenario is the archetype copied the Shroud. Here's why. First, other than obvious artistry like color and open eyes, the archetype adds nothing to the Shroud. The less detailed archetype can't be the sole source of the more detailed Shroud, but the Shroud can be the sole source of the archetype. Second, several shared traits are deliberate on the archetype, but accidental on the Shroud. For example, the thin face is partly due to imperfections in the weave. The collar on the archetypes is a crease in the Shroud. The face on the archetypes is slightly off-center due to the body's placement on the Shroud. Copying requires intent. By definition, accidents are not intended, so the archetype can be the copy, but the Shroud can't. Third, video 3.11 summarizes dozens of videos that support our position, that the Shroud is not intentionally designed or produced. Again, copying requires intent. Archetypes are clearly intentional artistic works. The Shroud is not. So several lines of simple reasoning all date the Shroud to 530 or earlier. Next, Lucidarium's history adds to our knowledge.